Good evening. Pardon me, had to just make sure I had my volume off there. Good evening. I'm Tilo Peters. I've met you before, and I'm happy to have you here tonight, this evening, and I hope that you are doing well in this this Ramadan season. So I think that this is a good opportunity for us to let you know more about the program and what is being expected of you. One thing I would like to do, just as a general reminder, is to let you know that the program that we're working on, that we've had up and running, is the Launching New Ventures platform. That's still there, and I've noticed that there's not as much activity going on there as we would expect to see. So I just want to encourage you to join in and to take the opportunity to learn from that and get the benefit of that program. So this is something that we'd like to see you doing more of. Now, we are working you towards a deadline, towards the opportunity for you to submit in the middle of August. And what we've done is we've prepared a template that will help lead you through the process. And so what I'm going to do with you this evening is talk with you about what is expected of you and how the template is designed to lead you through a process and to a conclusion that will help better explain both to yourself and to others the nature of your business idea and what potential it has. So, you know, a lot of these things, of course, tie back to what you had in the boot camp back in April. And so we'll keep going with these to provide you with an idea of how to work forward on that. So what I'm going to do here, I will see about, I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint and we'll share that with you. So I'm going to Okay, so I'm going to share with you my screen and just give you an idea of the template that we're working on. Now, this is oh, that's odd. Wait a minute here, let me just. Okay, so I need to change my display's preferences. Okay. So what we have now is, this is the title slide, and this will help you, we want you to express your business as you see that it will emerge. And for that, what we want you to do is establish an identity. Now, this will be part of your brand, part of your business identity, and it will help you to progress as you go. Now, your logo is always a nice thing to work on. It should have some thematic elements that in some way, either figuratively or literally, tie into your business. And so you want to spend some time imagining what is the core concept and core benefit of your business, and see how you can arrange to develop an identity around that, both visually and in words or notions. So now you see the submission date on this is on 14th of August, and this will allow you to submit, and then we will review that, and that will this should give you, it's a brief amount of time, but it's going to be a very intense period for you to need to prepare for that. So let's look at the milestones. And this in the template is a very important thing. Of course, we've already been working through the webinars. And so during this month, you're really working at developing your business idea, getting a concept of who your market is, and within that market, you will validate who exactly your customers are. Now, this is where you are working with a prototypical customer, and ideally you will get some specific ideas of customers, but you need to really think about this, work it through, and validate it. Now, validation means you're not just doing desk research, you're not just imagining what a customer might be, but you are looking at, going out, asking who is your customer, what is important to them. And this will not only help you better ground your business idea, it will help develop it and inform it, because the best and most important thing about generating a business idea is letting the customer help to formulate that with you. Listen to the customer. This is one of the best ways to develop a business idea, or at least to mature it. And so that is your goal for by the end of May. Now, given that in the situation where we are talking about primarily looking at platform and app-driven applications, what we want to look at here is developing an advanced prototype, something that is very, very basic, a wireframe of your web structure, a landing page, and again, getting back to the logo, your visual identity. Now, visual identity is both thematic and so it's not just about a logo. It also has to do with what is the theme, what are the color themes, all of these things. And making it so that it ties in some way to a larger framework. One example I think is interesting to look at there is that, of course, if you look at, many of you are using Slack now. Slack started out as an independent company, but then they changed the logo after Microsoft purchased it. And if you look at the Slack logo, which is stylistically quite different from Microsoft, it still has a thematic element that ties back into the Microsoft logo. It has the same colors and in quadrants, but not all in the same quadrants. So, these are things that you identify as the fact that now Slack, being a part of Microsoft and part of that ecosystem, has a unique visual identity, but it still relates back to the parent company's identity in some thematic way. So those can be very helpful things. So you want to get that done by mid-June. And so this is a matter of doing your first iteration of your development and of what your product should and would look and act like. And these are important things to work on. It takes you this time to build that what it looks like, and also to redevelop it, to bring it around into new, just to tweak it and do initially very rough formulations, but iteration, developing it and going through it again and again is one of the best tools. It's sort of a form of brainstorming that helps you to further develop and better refine your product. And so then once you have that, this is, a point where you're starting to get into your minimum viable product. And so this is a way for you to test, what the basic element is. So work just for what is the core value proposition of what you're working on. Don't worry too much about adding additional features. This is one of the big traps that any entrepreneur gets into, because you think of, as an entrepreneur, you are always thinking of what could this be? How could it become something even more advanced, something that has even more value? But the first thing you need to do is establish a good, solid platform, a foundation to build on. So, and so by mid-July, you should be testing your minimum viable product and really see if you can get it published in a platform, if you're talking about an app, or get it up and functioning online, so that you can have beta testers working on developing and debugging issues. So, with that's mid-July. Then 1 month later, in mid-August, we would be looking for having a final submission. And this will include a functional minimum viable product. You want to have 10 active users at least. And then you want to have a minimum of one committed customer. Somebody who, even if you have a minimum viable product, somebody who is committed in some way and voicing their opinion that they will actually spend money on your invention, on your business idea. And then ideally, we want you to have a 1-minute video that introduces your business. And it's amazing how much information you can put into a 1-minute video. But it is difficult. You have to think about how to make that 60 seconds be effective for you. It's actually harder to say things in less time. And so think about this. Try to imagine how you can strip away everything from your big idea and just explain what is, with a laser focus, how you can get that to your audience in the most effective way in that short amount of time. And then, of course, you will also want to have a business plan. And we've got all of these things in here. And so So these are the steps that you'll need to do. And yes, so the key on the video is that you do want to keep it really to 1 minute. You know, if it's, and think about for every second, how long do you need it to be there? And best, you know, the best thing you can do is very quickly illustrate, give examples. And that's the wonderful thing about video representation on this, is that the examples provide you with, the examples provide you with, they give imagery to the audience, and that communicates so much more than words. So if you are trying to explain it by standing in front of the camera and just explaining, my product does this, it does that, it does that, 60 seconds is going to be extremely difficult. But if you can do it through imagery and example, you can say so much more. And so try to make sure you keep that as brief as possible with the most impactful examples that you can find and think of. Okay, so then we get to the basic information of your business idea. So this is your introduction page. This will indicate to the reviewers about what is most important. So first off, of course, and I know you had it on the title page, you had the logo, but you want to put your name and you want to give the reader some idea of what industry you are addressing. And this is important. This is a matter of framing the expectations of the user, of the reader in this case. So by having this, by having this information, out there, what industry, then, you're pointing the reader to build expectations of what they're going to be thinking of. So, if you have something that is, that is addressing a business to business concept of helping businesses seek better transportation options, the reader isn't going to just go into it thinking, that you're talking about something like a ride-hailing service. So these things are very important that you make sure you identify to the reader what is the key area you're addressing. And of course, then you can add in your logo, and you need to identify the contact person. And the contact person, in this case, when we talk about your position, it's your position, your title within the startup. And so this is, the fact that, are you the CEO? Are you what do you consider yourself to be in a most functional manner? Are you the CEO? Are you the chief technical officer? Are you the programmer, the development manager? Are you in charge of sales and marketing? So these are the things that you want to do. You want to identify who you are and what relevance you have to the project. Then talk about your contact, your contact number and your email. Now, you also want to have a URL representing your business. So give the URL for your business. So, your business landing page. And then also you want to give an address for your functional MVP. And so if you do have your functional MVP up on the App Store, then give that address, give how to find that. And then likewise for the video, what is the URL? Presumably you would have it on YouTube, so give the YouTube link for that video. And of course, you then also want to describe what business model in general that you're looking at? Is it business to consumer, consumer to consumer, business to business? That's what these mean. And so it's just in general, who is the primary customer you are addressing? Are you selling services to businesses? Are you just providing a platform that is a consumer to consumer linkage? So, look at that and then give a few descriptive statistics about your business. What is the current number of your users and what customers do you have? So you can definitely use platforms to create, you can use tools to create your web page, your web identity, WordPress, Weebly, any number of those. And so those are helpful for you to look at. And certainly do anything you can to make this process more expedient for you, have it work, use time to your advantage here. And so then you also want to identify your team. So who are your founders? Most importantly, of course, who is the participant as part of the Al-Shabaab scheme? So generally we want to know, have you identified first. Again, talk about who you are, and it helps to give a background, a little bit of a bio, very brief, but not too brief. The importance here, again, think about the reader and who is going to be reading this. They want to know, what relevance do you have to this business idea, and what relevance do all the other people have? Now, we have, in this example, in this template, we have three frames. This is not a limitation. If you've got 10 people on your team, we'd like to see all 10 of them. So this can be, if you have 10 people, then do go to another page. Certainly feel free to make this a multiple page thing, but we want to know, who is it, what do they do, and what their background is that adds value to this venture. Because what we see, of course, is that teams bring value. Having a diversity in the group with a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different benefits to the team, that brings value. So, just make sure you are clear in this. Now, the next thing that you want to do, so we have a question here that what is the maximum number of people in a team? That is completely dependent upon the business idea, the complexity of it, and also the perceived ability for that business to be sustainable. Now, if you have 20 people on the team, the first thing that somebody is going to ask is, how are you paying for all these people? What is the benefit to the business? And if there are too many people who are anticipating, being supported by this business, this will cause a tremendous load on the business. So you want to make sure that if you have 20 people, that each of them adds more value to the business than they would require for their own sustenance. And so you want to try and make sure that you want to make sure that you get to to talking about that. Now, the other thing to look at, just see here. Okay, so yeah, the thing you want to look at here is you want to succinctly address the problem you are solving. Now, storytelling is a good thing to do, but you cannot let the story overwhelm the explanation. So try to illustrate the problem, but in a very, very brief manner. And so describe the problem, give an example of the problem, but try not to make it so that you're telling a story that doesn't really bring the reader to an explanation of exactly what is the problem. And this is something that people often get lost in. And so I want you to think again, how do you do that very, very briefly and succinctly? If it takes more than, a minute of explanation to say just what the problem is, you're not going to capture the attention of potential investors or even potential customers. So you have to be very succinct in this, but at the same time, you want to be clear, what is that problem? Make sure that you nail it down, and I also identify not just what is the problem, but also who is experiencing that problem. So this will help you to identify market size as well. So the problem, we'll talk about who is experiencing the problem, and then you also talk about who is, what your solution is, and you need to say not just what is your solution, but give some indication of how that solution will be functional and what value it adds to the customer. So those are some things that you want to look at. And then you need to examine what makes your solution different from and superior to other solutions. And think of not just direct competitors, but also consider substitutes. So, if you say, oh, well, we want to deliver hot breakfast to people at the bus stop where they're waiting for a bus, or at a fuel station or someplace like that. Yes, you're preparing a breakfast for them and delivering that to them, but a substitute is that they can just go into a location and buy coffee and something to eat very quickly. So this isn't a direct competitor, but every substitute is a competitor, and so you have to identify what advantage you offer there. So these are the important things to look at. And then you need to basically convince the reader, the reviewer, of the size of the market and what is the nature of the market. Now, you'll remember that, for instance, Mark Gruber talked about where to play and how to identify your market opportunity. And this is the condensation of those tools. And so this will give you by using those tools, and then taking the tools, the worksheets that Mark Gruber gave you, and then in this page, you describe the output, everything that you learned from those sheets about what is the market potential, the market opportunity that those tools helped you to to identify. So the important thing is you've been given the tools, but you have to compress it, condense it, process the output, and explain it to the reader. And so then you also, you talked about what is the opportunity in the market, but then you really need to start to dissect the market. You want to identify what is the not just the market size, but what patterns the market has. Is it a seasonal market? Is it a market that is more likely to see sales in the summertime versus in the wintertime? What are the opportunities of the market, both geographically and by any other breakdown you can think of? So, really what you want to do is explain how that market can best be addressed. And then, of course, you look at the market analysis and the analysis of your competitors. And there are a lot of ways to do it. We give you here a reference for how to conduct competitive analysis. And this is a really helpful tool, and it shows you how to look at competitors, both direct, indirect, and latent. So you've got all these different competitors out there, and so you want to make sure that you identify all of them, because the thing that can too often plague a business is this difficulty of really of either failing to identify a key competitor or miss one altogether. So do be careful about your competitor analysis. Be thorough, and it will in the end help you on that. So then, of course, you need to look at risks. Now, what are risks? Risks are anything that could be a threat that will or anything that could be a danger to your company. Now, the risks could be anything. It could be, the fact that that the technology you're using is somehow protected by a patent, and you don't know that. And how do you mitigate that risk? You also want to look at, if you have a risk of, do adverse weather conditions affect you? Are there risks that you may, the sector you're addressing could be held under regulatory compliance? And if it could be that, you don't have the ability to overcome those risks, but most often by identifying the risks and talking about potential mitigation, the ways that you can reduce that risk or counter that risk if it were to come up will be a way to strengthen your business. Okay, now I think most all of you have seen the business model canvas, but this is an outstanding tool to get a topography of your business model and how it can help you. So you've been through all this before, and it is important to know what partnerships you need to talk about. Who are your suppliers? Who are your distributors? Who are your funding agencies? Who are your you think of key partnerships also, can be both, it can be it can be your employees, it can be your team. Those are partnerships. What activities does the company have? What are the resources that you can marshal? And then you also want to look at your cost structure. It's important to know that if we're going to provide this service or this product, what is it going to cost us to do that? So you want to look at both what are your underlying costs. So what we say our fixed costs are. So if you have to rent an office or any facilities, or if you have to rent cloud computing or cloud services, what is the fixed cost? What is the one amount you have to pay every month in order to maintain that? Okay, but for instance, if you also then have, if you have a charge, for instance, for every search or every calculation that is done as part of a cloud service, or just the same as if you are producing a product, what is the cost of each part that goes into that product? So those are called the variable costs, because if you don't have anybody doing searches on your platform, then you don't incur any costs there. Or likewise, if you produce a part, if you produce an object, then for each object, say you have a watch, for each additional one you build, then you have additional parts cost for that. So that's the difference. You need to look at your cost structure, both fixed and variable. And you need to look at the value propositions that you're offering. So what activities using what resources can generate what value? And then you also need to look at what is your customer relationship, and how will you get to those customers, the channels by which you will address the customers. So you have to look at who are your customers, what are the segments of customers you're addressing, and the channels that will help you address those customer segments. And then most importantly, down on the bottom there, what are the revenue streams that will be generated from that activity? So you will want to look at those things. Now you can get a few more tips on how to use this by going to Strategizer and looking at the business model canvas. They've got some explanations there as well. So for all of these things, you can find more resources just by either going to the sources we're giving you, or something as simple as doing a Google search, or even just looking it up in Wikipedia to get more explanations. These will help you out. So you can find those all the time. Now, we also added this because some people have digital platforms in as their business ideas. Now, why is a digital platform model different than a standard business model? Well, in one way, it's because in a two-sided platform, you have to attract the producer segment, and you also have to attract the consumer segment. So let's talk about something like Uber. Uber is a service that does not own any cars. It doesn't hire employees to act as drivers. What Uber needed to do was attract people to be drivers, because if they didn't have enough drivers, they also wouldn't have enough customers. And you can look at this as, you have your producer segment. There are many different ways that a business will have a producer segment. TripAdvisor is an interesting one because the customers are also the producer segments. And so you look at, for each one of those segments, you have to look at what is the value proposition that they are achieving and how does that benefit them. And so you have to look at what is the core interaction between each of these two segments. Who are the partners? How do you filter it? What are the cost and revenue structures? And how do they get there? How is it that you can best get them to identify with this? So if you have the case of Uber, you have people, their journey as a producer is, I don't have that much to do. I've got a car that sits in front of my house all the time, and I'm bored. So why don't I make use of that? And likewise, the customer segment says, this city doesn't have enough taxis, so I can't get to it. How do I get a different relationship with a taxi, instead of a taxi? So these are things that you want to look at. This tool helps you to take a different approach to visualizing what is your business model and how you can best address that in a digital platform environment. And so, think about, is your platform a two-sided platform? And if so, this is a tool that can be very helpful for you. Okay, so, and this is what you also want to look at. And again, we've talked about earlier on, what is the problem, what is the solution? Now we're getting, with all of these tools, these are the tools that you're going to use to try and express those values and solutions by looking at how you're generating value. So, here what we look at on the right-hand side is the pains and the gains, and what tasks the customer has what is the challenge they're facing, and how those pains and gains are addressed. And so then you look at what are the things that can create gain, can create benefit, and also what can help reduce the pain. And so, so you're envisioning the product or service and how those things feed in. So, on both sides here, you work from the outside in. What is the challenge the customer is facing? And on this side, you look at what is the product we're offering? And then for that product, what gain does it allow people? And how does it mitigate pains, problems, or obstacles for the consumer? And how do those two things match to each of these two sides? So that's going to be the thing that's important for you to look at. And so this is a good tool. The value proposition canvas is indelibly linked to the business model canvas. It helps, it gives you the products that you can output from the value proposition to the business model. Yep. So then you need to look at, as part of this, what is your revenue model? How are you going to get people to reach their hand into their pocket and pull out the money, that will create benefit for you? So this is the thing that you're always facing with a business, is that you are effectively trying to buy your customers' money with your service. So how do you develop that? How do you develop this model that provides something to the customer and for which the customer is somehow willing to pay for it? And at what levels do you believe, and can you validate that the customer will do something? So, as an example, you have to look at if you're providing some sort of a dinner experience or an evening experience. Say that you have somebody who is offering a boat ride, a dinner boat ride out of Muscat. And so you have to look at first off, what is the cost of providing that? What is the cost of the food? What is the cost of the crew for the boat? And what is the cost of the fuel for the boat? And so all of those things have to be included in it. But if you're trying to, you also have to think about what are the options that the consumer is looking at. how does your offering stack up against, for instance, going out to dinner at a restaurant and a movie? So, these are things that you want to make sure that you are in line with consumers' expectations. So, this is what you want to do. You want to make sure that you have a clear picture on not just on what is your price, but why is your price significant? And, for this example, you need to understand, what is, it's not just, oh, well, it costs me 10 real to make this product, so therefore I should charge 20. You also want to look at it from the, that's a bottom-up approach where you're saying, okay, it costs me this much and I want to have that much more revenue from it. But you can also do a top-down approach. What is the value to the consumer? What value are they getting? And how much is that worth to them? And if the closest substitute costs 100 real, then you are providing something for 20 real that is of a superior value than that. So then you want to think, well, if the nearest competitor is 100 real and we're providing something at a value that is superior, then if we charge 90 real, then it's still an advantage to the consumer. So you need to look at your pricing model and what are you doing? So look at it both top down and bottom up. And so you also want to look at your key customer insights. Again, go back to the pains, and in this case, be open to your process. That means that you have to look at, you look at all the things that you've found out in this journey that you've made to discover your customer, and really be aware of what surprised me there. Because it's those times when you find that there's something surprising that you may find a value that you didn't anticipate. Or you may find that there was an assumption you were making about the customer or about the benefit of your product that didn't make itself evident to the client, or that your customer doesn't actually need. And so you need to keep an open mind to that. And if somebody, if somebody says to you, you're interviewing customers and they say, oh, this isn't important to me, don't just think that they're not thinking properly. You need to think about, why is that a conclusion that your customer had? What do they care about? And what are their unmet needs? And how is your product addressing that? And so for this one, as you get through this, you develop your customer persona. You identify a group or several typical groups of customers. Are these customers, businessmen in Muscat or other urban areas? Is your customer segment shop owners in smaller towns and villages? Is your customer segment persona a tourist from other parts of the Arabic Peninsula, or are they tourists coming from other areas? All of these things build into who is your customer persona, and it helps you build a more clear representation of what your business is. And then, of course, you want to describe what is their journey, what are their pains, what are their obstacles, and how you can help them on that journey. And then you also need to have a strategy for how do you address that market? How do you intersect your strategy to execute your product with the customer journey and the needs of your customer itself? And so talk about the strategy and exactly how you will address the market, how you will approach it and enter into it. These are all things that are very important. And then given that strategy and all of these things, you need to validate who, you've talked about who your customer is, but you need to demonstrate to the reader that you have worked to validate the customer, to demonstrate that that customer is who you think it is, and that that customer is willing to use and to purchase your product. Now, then you need to get to financials. This is going to be difficult. Now, we've shared with you some tools that you can use this for, and financials should in some way address the needs of, okay, yeah, I've got financials somewhere else. Okay, okay. So the financials we'll get to a bit later, but it just is, it should be a summary of what you need and why you need it. So again, you want to represent your landing page. Here, this is the thing. We want to have screenshots of your landing page and the URL. That's helpful, but don't make the reader go to the landing page in order to see it. You want to just give a representation of what they would see if they did. And also, what is your functional minimum viable product? Again, screenshots help tell the story. It's a way of storyboarding how you will lead your user through, and again, the URL. And evidence of buying customers. This is where you want to have somebody who has written a letter of intent, who has pledged that they will invest or will buy your product. This is what you really want to do. The first customer is always the hardest one to get, but that is what investors are going to be looking for. That's what they need to see when they are looking at if they should invest in your business. Since the first customer is the hardest one to get, if you can demonstrate that you have the first customer already, then you've won half the battle. So that's an important thing to look at. And of course, evidence of active users. This can be user logs. This can be, especially if you are getting a lot of feedback from the users. This is really helpful if you can demonstrate with testimonials and what is most useful to, if they can show that it's useful to them and that they are active, but also user logs, just the logs from your MVP. This is an important thing. Now I know that Ali has asked about what is the difference between the landing page and the functional MVP. Now, it may be the same thing. So as an example, Google, their landing page is their product. It is their functional product as far as from the consumer is concerned. However, you have other situations where you may have an app that's not up on the App Store yet, but you have a functional minimum viable product working in a cloud environment. So that could be a different thing. Now, a lot of businesses, pretty much every business that has an app also has a landing page that tells about the business, tells about where they have support and questions that can be asked. Things that don't necessarily have to be within the app will be hosted on the landing page. So the landing page could be the same thing, but it could also be different. You want to make sure that, if you think about having an app, it's it's, the landing page is your back office. It's where you keep, you handle the secondary part of the business. So those are the things to think about. It could be the same thing, but if in some senses, it could be different. Okay, and again, we want to show evidence of what tests you have done, how you've been beta testing. And so if you can demonstrate that you have different versions that you've worked on it as you're working through bugs, just showing a log of that will happen. Also, tests of user activity, things of that nature, provides you with that evidence. Okay, now, a SWOT analysis is an important thing to look at. It's a very simple tool. Now, what you're doing here is you're splitting your environment into two halves. On the one vector, you have the things that are inherent to your organization. What strengths does your organization have, and what weaknesses does it have? But these strengths and these weaknesses are not in the abstract. So, saying, oh, as a strength, we have employees. Well, your competitors also have employees. And, or we have knowledgeable employees. Your competitors probably also have knowledgeable employees. So you want to have what differentiates your organization, your company, or your product from all the others. So what are the strengths that you have, and what are the weaknesses? Now, of course, for instance, if you are working on a minimum viable product, a weakness may be that your technology doesn't have as many features as a competitor's does, but you may have a strength that you are addressing the customer segment more accurately with your solution. So these two things, the strengths and the weaknesses, are internal and relative to other companies. And then you have the environmental aspects, the opportunities and the threats. Those are things outside of your company. So what is happening in your environment that could create opportunity for you? So, if there are new developments, if you know that there is going to be regulation in an area, and that if you are ahead of that regulation, then you can have an opportunity that will allow you to excel over your competitors, or that will create a barrier to entry for other people. Or threat. What is a threat? One threat could be that your product is doing something good, so another company that has more resources or more access to markets just imitates your product and takes it over. So if your product can be easily imitated by a larger player, then this is a threat. So this is something, for instance, that we saw with some of the social media things, that every time Snapchat developed something, Facebook imitated it, and then Snapchat no longer had a competitive advantage because Facebook had so many more people. So these are things that you can think of as opportunities and threats. So now you fill in this template talking about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And again, always make sure that the strengths and weaknesses are in comparison to your competitors. The opportunities and threats are relative to your company's activities and also relative to how it could affect you versus competitors. But now you've got this all filled out, and what we want to then do is have you describe, having had the reader look at this, we want you to describe, how do you mitigate those threats, and how do you mitigate the weaknesses? And likewise, how do you ensure that your strengths remain strengths relative to your competition? And how do you develop a strategy to be able to position yourself to be ready for the opportunities that could be out there? So this is a key step. The SWOT analysis, in this sense, it just is a representation. It's stating the way things are and the way things look, how they are now and how they are in the future. This is where you provide your knowledge and your information that will give, that will convince the reader, the investor, to think about, this person knows how they can handle that. They've got an idea of how to take that control of that situation and work it to their benefit. So, showing somebody the SWOT analysis is okay. It shows that you've done the SWOT analysis. The SWOT mitigation shows that you've thought about it and that you really have put it into your way of thinking and into your strategy. Okay, now we have this other tool here that is a really helpful thing. And the reference on the bottom, thebest3minutes.com, talks about the pitch canvas. Pitch is something that you want to build not only for investors, but also for customers, for supporters, and even for for developing your team, and for convincing people that you have a vision for what the future is looking for. So it is a very concise description of the pains and the gains, the product, maybe a product demo. I tend to be not in favor of really focusing on the product demo. A product demo might just be showing, being able to show what it is, but not how it works. Product demos can, number one, if they're not bulletproof and rock solid, they can, even if it takes time for you to get the demo working, that's time lost. But but a demo can also just be showing somebody, this is what my product looks like. These are some of the screenshots. That's a demo. Talk about what is unique about your product, and unique is really something that is setting you apart. What's singular? Talk about customer traction. How are you getting convincing the customers to use your product? What's the business model? How are you going to generate revenues from it? What investment do you want? Now, for different audiences, this can be a different thing. If you want partners, if you want investors, if you want customers, this canvas can be changed in different ways. But you talk about the investment, you talk about the team. Now, if you are talking about specifically investment, people invest in teams. They invest in not just the business idea, they invest in the combined ability of the team to execute on that business idea. So this is an important thing to think about. And then you want to make sure that you have a strong call to action. This is your vision. This is how you plan to harness this advantage, and that this is driving you to do this. And this is how you are mustering your team, how you're all sharing a unified vision. And then also explain why you. Is it because you have the passion? Is it because you have the capability? Is it because you have, special connections? All of the things. But remember, as the title, this reference says, you're talking about 3 minutes. You have to try and get this concise and in 3 minutes. Now, a pitch is something that you fill in these boxes, sure, but you have to practice it. You have to be able to say it in your sleep in 3 minutes and be convincing and be passionate. That's important for all of these things. So, learning how to do a pitch, there's one thing about learning it, there's the other thing, you have to know it. So work on that. It's important. Now, let's talk briefly about the financial plan. Financial plan has to demonstrate your understanding of the financials. How are you going to have income? What will be the cash flow? Well, you're thinking income is cash flow. Well, income is what money comes in, but then you also have money going out. Who are you going to be paying? How are you going to get food on your table? And then, the cash flow results in the balance sheet. If you have more money going out than coming in, then your balance sheet is going to be negative. How do you adjust the balance sheet? You gather investment. You get people to invest money. Maybe you invest money, and maybe that's how you generate your balance sheet. Or maybe you actually get revenue that exceeds your income. So these are things that you need to look at. Now, these things that you're talking about are in the future. You right now are in a prototype stage. You are in the early foundational stages. So you need to look 1, 2, 3 years into the future and decide how well you might be doing in the future. And so first you take the most realistic case without any exaggeration or optimism, and you plug that in. You think about, okay, if I can get 100 people a month to pay for a subscription, if you think that's the most credible option, then use that. And then think, well, what if I can only get 10 or 50 people a month to do this? Or what if I'm able to get 250 a month to do this? So think about the most optimistic, the most pessimistic, and sometimes the most pessimistic may be 0. But all of these things, and you can run different numbers on this. That's the wonderful thing about Excel, is that all you have to do is put in a slightly different number, say, well, what if the number was this? And you can see these changes. And so, again, your financial plan will have your product, service, pricing policy calculated, as I explained, bottom up and top down. And then you need to talk about your cash requirements. One thing that people refer to as this is, what is your glide slope? So how much, given the amount of money your business burns, how much money are you going to need to get you to enough altitude so that by the time you start making revenues, you haven't already hit the ground? And so they talk about your cash requirements, how to make sure your business opportunity will still be there given the funding that you have. And so this, this is an important thing. You have to look at your break even. So what does it take for you to just break even, as far as cash? So what does it take to get cash so that you're bringing in as much cash as you're putting out? What is a profit break even? So maybe you have things that you haven't paid for yet, or you have other causes. So profit break even is, what does it really take for us to be able to show our investors that we have made money for them? And then you talk about burn rates. Now, again, burn rates, I also talked about the glide slope. This is, this is the analogy of a sink rate with airplanes. So, for every meter forward that a plane goes, how much further down does it go? That slope is what's called the burn rate. And so one thing that I find is very, very helpful, and we say it's optional, is that it should contain a financial contingency plan and really a model of what happens if we don't meet this milestone, or what happens if we don't do this. What restructuring would we do in order to adapt to the new reality? These are important things to think about. And the reason I say that is that even though what you may find is that eventually your business difficulties will in fact not actually happen to be what you have in the financial contingency plan, having done the planning gives you the confidence and the tools to attack the new problem as it arises. So that's an important thing. You really want to work at that. And so I've included some useful tools and provided those to Case. There are 2 spreadsheets. I have one that's a very simple accounting template, and it just handles the very basic things. And for some business scenarios, that may be good. But then I also got a financial projection spreadsheet that's from SCORE, which is an organization that aids entrepreneurs. SCORE is an organization of retired business executives, and they develop this, and it's a very good tool. And so that should be, I think, posted somewhere on the resources that you have. So so this is an example of the SCORE spreadsheet, and of course this is all done in Excel. And what you're doing here is you're breaking it down month by month to analyze what you think will be happening here with your business. Now, this monthly process is something you may choose to do it instead on a quarterly basis. It's up to you. It's what can give you the best information. Now, the thing is, if you think that there are going to be some months that are higher than other months, if you think that there's going to be a cyclical value to your revenues, then that's where you really think that monthly analyses help. So be flexible in how you do it. You can do it monthly, you can do it quarterly, you can do it annually, or I also have, as I said, the simple spreadsheet. These things will help you to examine, what your vision is. So, what we showed here is the cash flow statement, what's coming in, what's coming out. And then we have the income statement, which talks about, given your revenues and your expenses, what you end up as an income. And then you think about, and you're in a startup situation, quite often for the first year, 2 years, your income is a negative value. So, that is, when you have negative income, that's considered a loss. Now, the balance sheet is really just looking at is your balance going to be at the end of a year, or the end of an accounting period. You could have quarterly balance sheets. These are all things that you can do, but this is basically giving a look ahead of, based on what's been generated from the other spreadsheets, in the workbook, how does that affect the balance, the amount of money that you have in your various accounts, and what obligations and liabilities you have. So this is an example of a very, of a balance sheet that deals with multiple items to look at. Okay, so that was, these I was there explaining to you a lot of the tools that you have to express your business idea with. I encourage you to use any and all tools that you have at your disposal. Now, what are the requirements for you to have a successful evaluation of your business? Well, you really need to, it's extremely helpful for you to have at least one co-founder. It's difficult for investors to imagine investing in just one person, because that one person then may, get sick, may lose interest, may decide to go just for a irrational reason, may decide to go in a different direction. A business runs better with a team, even if that team is 2 people. This involves discussion, compromise, all of those things that add value to the business. So think about having a co-founder. Now, if you have the idea and you have the way to execute that idea, your co-founder does not need to be a 50% equity shareholder in this. A co-founder can be a minor shareholder. It is good if the co-founder has some equity in the game, but there's nothing to say that you can't own 90% of the venture and that your co-founder only has 10% of the venture. And so you need to have, for the better part of the better interest of your business, you need to have a co-founder. I strongly encourage that. Now, you also have to have some representation of a functional MVP. It can still be in a rough stage, but it needs to be your minimum viable product. We want to see that you have some evidence of active users, at least 10. And we also want to see some evidence, some commitment, some testimonial of somebody willing to put money down on your product and to purchase, somebody who is a customer. This is a customer, not an investor. Now, then we also want to see that you've thought about and developed the visual identity and the representation of your company and your product. So have a visual identity and a landing page. 1-minute video and the business plan and market research. Now, this template is what will function as your business plan, but you can expand upon that. Look at what elements there are in business plans. And if you have, this is only a template. Every business has its own situation, its own condition. So use this template, but do feel free to add elements to it. One thing you're doing as an entrepreneur is expressing your identity and why you are unique and capable in this sense. So look at that and then talk about, make sure that you have these things ready and submitted by the 14th of August. So that is the drop dead submission date, and there will be no extensions on that. So this is the important thing, that you do need to implement that in time. So now these are the resources. All of this template is available for you on the resource page, the Google page that was shown to you, that was shared on Slack. So feel free to take advantage of that. And with that, I think we have that done. So I'm available to answer any questions for you. If anybody has any questions. So do feel free to look at that, to examine it, think about it. If you have questions, you can always pose questions on the Launching New Ventures platform, and or you can address it. You can address me directly, or I'm on Slack. So Slack is a tremendously good way to contact me, and so I'm in the group. So just feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Okay. So if there are no other questions, then I thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing how you progress in your business idea. And I wish you all the best luck. So thank you very much.